There's something no one tells you. The deeper you heal, the lonelier it might feel. You expect light, but instead, shadows move closer. You think you're becoming better, but they say you've changed, as if that's a crime. Have you ever wondered why the people closest to you turn away, just as you finally begin to return to yourself? If you've ever felt abandoned, in the very moment you became more whole, this isn't just your story, it's a silent war, and it started the moment you stopped pretending. There's a mirror, and you became it. This journey isn't about being loved by everyone. It's about loving who you truly are, even when they don't. Thank you for being here. Stay with me, because what comes next might explain everything. It doesn't begin with anger, or confrontation, or even words. It begins in the quiet moments, when someone close stops meeting your eyes, when conversations feel heavier, like you've said too much, without saying anything new. You feel it, a shift, invisible but undeniable. You wonder if you've done something wrong. Maybe you were too honest, too different, too much. But what if you didn't do anything to them? What if your only mistake was becoming a mirror? Carl Jung once said, "We despise in others what we have not accepted in ourselves." When you begin healing, you unknowingly hold up that mirror to everyone still avoiding their own reflection. And mirrors are not always welcome, especially when they show cracks no one's ready to repair. You didn't mean to make them uncomfortable, but your peace highlighted their chaos. Your confidence echoed their doubts. Your truth disrupted their illusion. So they pull away, not because they hate you, but because they fear the version of themselves they see, standing beside the version of you they never expected. The mirror you became is too clear now, too real, too bright. And when the light gets too bright, some people don't look closer. They look away. This is not your punishment. This is the first sign that you've stepped beyond your old shape. And yes, it hurts. But this is what transformation often feels like at first. Not celebration, but silence. Let that silence be sacred. Let it be proof that you are no longer who they used to need and finally becoming who you do. The mirror broke, not because it was wrong, but because it revealed too much, too fast. And beneath those shards of misunderstanding, you're about to meet yourself again, more fully, more gently, more truly. Just breathe here, before we step deeper. You didn't expect it to feel like betrayal, not from them, not from the ones who once knew every version of you, but it doesn't come with a warning. It arrives quietly, through the eyes that now avoid yours, the calls that don't come, the energy that shifts without a word. And that's what stings the most, the absence of conflict, the absence of care. It's not a fight, it's a fading. And you're left in the silence, wondering if you imagined it, but you didn't. This is what Jung called projection. When you stop playing the role others gave you, you disrupt something deeper than comfort. You become the mirror. And people who've avoided their reflection suddenly see too much. Not of you, of themselves, of the pain they've buried, of the parts they denied. And in your presence, those parts start breathing again, but not openly, not consciously. It rises as discomfort, as distance, as dismissal, not because you've harmed them, but because you've become too honest, too whole, too real. And realness, to the fragmented, feels like violence. You didn't ask for this war. You never raised your voice. You only stopped lowering your light. And still, they retreat, label you cold, whisper that you've changed. And they're right, you have. But not in the way they fear. You became more yourself, more centered, more true. And they were not ready to meet that version. So they vanish, silently, sharply, with smiles that don't reach the eyes anymore. And you're left grieving people who are still alive, just no longer present. But what if this is not your failure? What if it's proof? that you've outgrown every role built on suppression. If you feel this quiet violence, this pull away when you finally show up as you, write it somewhere, or here. I'm learning to be whole, even when it costs connection, because soon we'll reach the place where masks fall away, and something ancient beneath them starts to breathe again. There was a time you wore the mask so well you forgot it was a mask, not because you were fake, but because it was survival. You smiled when you wanted to disappear. You nodded when your soul said no. You agreed just to be loved. The mask kept you safe, kept you acceptable, kept you small. But here's the quiet truth. Masks don't just cover us, they slowly replace us. And over time, you didn't just wear the role, you became it. The helpful one, the quiet one, the strong one, the one who never needed anything. Until one day, your spirit whispered, I don't recognize this anymore. And the mask began to crack. Not because something was wrong, but because something real was finally waking up. Jung called it individuation, the painful, beautiful process of becoming who you truly are, separate from who you were told to be. And that awakening, that peeling back of layers, it doesn't come with applause, it comes with grief. You grieve who you were, who they loved, who you pretended to be, because now you're no longer willing to shrink, no longer able to perform, no longer interested in being easy to digest, and some won't know how to hold that, because they were in love with your performance, not your person, and when the mask falls, they fall away with it. It's not your job to chase them, it's not your fault they love the illusion. Your task now is to stay real, to stay awake, to hold your truth, even when it feels raw, even when no one claps. If you've ever felt this unraveling, this strange ache of becoming, whisper this to yourself. I'm not here to be pleasing, I'm here to be whole, because the face beneath the mask was never too much. It was just waiting for your permission to be seen. There's a strange kind of discomfort that enters a room, not when you do something wrong, but when you finally do something real. You speak your truth, you set your boundary, you say no, when once you always said yes, and suddenly you feel it, the tension, the shift, the silence that wraps itself around your honesty, not because your words were cruel, but because your clarity unmasked their chaos. Carl Jung said, we despise in others what we haven't accepted in ourselves. So when you stop shrinking, when you stop apologizing for your needs, you unknowingly trigger their shadow, their denied pain, their unhealed wounds, their unmet desires. It rises not as confession but as critique, not as vulnerability but as resistance. You are not the enemy, but your growth reminds them they've stayed still. Your confidence becomes an accusation, your peace a confrontation, your wholeness a mirror too sharp to bear, and they push back, not to hurt you, but to avoid themselves. They might call you selfish, too much, unreasonable, but what they really mean is, you've stopped agreeing to your own erasure, and that makes them uncomfortable. Not everyone will cheer your healing. Some will grieve the version of you that made them feel safe, the one who never said no, the one who dimmed her light, the one who made room by making herself disappear. But you're done with that. You're reclaiming the parts you once gave away, just to be loved. And yes, they'll say you've changed, but the truth is you've returned to yourself. If you've ever felt this weight, this grief of being misunderstood for choosing you, leave a trace, whisper it here. I am not abandoning anyone. I am just no longer abandoning myself. Because this isn't rejection, it's revelation, and soon you'll understand why even love sometimes wears the mask of fear. It's strange how becoming whole can feel like starting a war. You thought healing would bring peace. Instead, it brought resistance. Not from within, but from the outside, from those who once loved your fragments, but can't seem to hold your fullness. You stopped breaking yourself to fit. You stopped softening truth to be palatable. You stopped showing up as half, just to keep the illusion of harmony. And that was enough to shake the ground they stood on, because when you become whole, you change the unspoken contract, the silent agreement. You be small, so they don't feel inadequate. You dim, so they can shine undisturbed. You smile, even when it hurts. You stay silent, even when your soul screams, but not anymore. You've outgrown that contract, and to them, that feels like betrayal. Not because you harmed them, but because you stopped abandoning yourself for their comfort. Carl Jung understood this rupture. He saw how the collective depends on conformity, on roles, on repetition. And when you break the pattern, when you step out of the cycle, you don't just change yourself, you threaten the entire system. Your wholeness becomes rebellion, your truth becomes disruption, your peace an act of defiance. But listen carefully, you are not wrong for evolving. You are not dangerous for becoming real. They may turn from you, label you difficult, different, distant, but that is not a measure of your worth. It's a reflection of their unreadiness to change, to meet themselves, to grow. You didn't start a war. You stopped participating in one, a war against yourself. And yes, the silence feels heavier. The distance feels colder, but the air is clearer here, the light more honest. If this part of the journey feels lonely, know this: you're not alone, you're just arriving. Whisper if it resonates. I am not here to rebel. I am here to return to myself, and that may look like rebellion to those who never dared. The ground may be shaky now, but something deep inside has never felt more steady. Silence is not always absence. Sometimes it's everything they wish they could say, but can't. Sometimes it's grief with no language, shame with no outlet, fear with no form. They stop talking to you, but inside, something is screaming, not at you. At the version of themselves they thought they buried. Your healing stirred it, not with noise, but with stillness. And in that stillness, the parts they denied woke up. That's why the air feels heavy, why the room shifts when you enter, not because you are wrong, but because you are real. And realness reveals what silence tried to hide. Jung called this the shadow, the hidden self, not evil, but exiled. And when your light finds it in them, they feel exposed, so they go quiet, withdraw, close doors, without slamming them. But the echo remains. And if you listen closely, beneath their silence is a voice trembling, saying, I don't know how to meet the version of you that no longer plays small for me. You're not being rejected, you're being witnessed too deeply. And that witnessing terrifies those who are not ready to be seen themselves. So their silence isn't always rejection, it's sometimes a boundary built from fear. And you must learn not to take that fear personally. You didn't cause it. You just walked in carrying wholeness, and that is louder than any scream. If their silence weighs on you, breathe and whisper, I am learning to hear what isn't said, and to forgive what they cannot speak. Because behind every absence is a story not yet ready to be told. But you are ready to keep going. Even if you walk forward with no applause, only echoes. There comes a moment when you're no longer predictable, no longer easy to read, no longer playing the part. And that makes you dangerous. Not because you've become cruel, not because you've changed your heart, but because you've stopped operating from your wounds. You now respond from wholeness, and wholeness is wild, uncontained, uncoded. You say no with softness. You walk away without rage. You forgive. Without forgetting, you've become the one who can hold both truths, both pain and peace, both grief and gratitude. Carl Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites until something higher is born. And in that state, you are not either or. You are and. You are strength and gentleness. You are clarity and compassion. You are presence and detachment. And to those who still live in black and white, you become chaos, because they don't know what to do with someone who doesn't play the game. They can't control you with guilt, can't manipulate you with approval, can't shame you into submission. You've stepped out of their script, and in doing so, you've triggered their fear of freedom, because deep down, they want what you found, but they're afraid of the cost. So instead of reaching toward it, they resist, they ridicule, they retreat, not because you are dangerous, but because you remind them they haven't yet dared to evolve. You've become a symbol of what's possible, and possibility is frightening to the unready. If you've felt this, the sharpness in their smile, the distance in their praise, the strange way they speak your name with both awe and edge, remember this. It's not about who you are. It's about who you've stopped being, the predictable, the passive, the pleasing. That version is gone, and now you are whole, and whole is sacred. If this truth touches you, breathe it in. I am not afraid of becoming whole, even if it makes others afraid of me, because transcendence isn't loud, it's clear, and clarity has always been the beginning of power. There's a version of you that always made space, for everyone, for everything. Even when you were breaking, you bent. Even when you were burning, you smiled. And somewhere along the way, you believed that's what love was, to disappear, to dim, to stay small so others could feel big. But what if I told you, you were never meant to stay hidden? What if the parts you buried, your voice, your clarity, your fire, were never flaws, but fragments waiting to return to the whole? You spent years performing peace, but peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of alignment, and now you're aligning, and it scares them, not because you're wrong, but because you no longer fit in the role they needed. You've stopped being the echo, you've become the voice, and that voice, it won't stay quiet anymore. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also warned that this privilege comes with a price, the loss of those who only loved your camouflage. It's not your job to carry their expectations. It's not your duty to make others comfortable with your disappearance. You were not born to be background. You were born to be whole, to be vivid, to be seen. And yes, it's lonely sometimes. But what's lonelier than betraying yourself just to be tolerated? If you feel the ache of shedding, but also the thrill of becoming, you're not broken, you're birthing. Write it here, or whisper it inside. I am done hiding in plain sight. Because the light you've been seeking is not out there, it's been you, unfiltered, unmasked, the whole time. No one tells you how much becoming real will cost. Not in money, not in time, but in relationships, in comfort, in belonging. Because the moment you stop pretending, you start shedding. And not just old versions of yourself, but people. The ones who needed your silence, the ones who depended on your compliance, the ones who called your boundaries betrayal. You lose them. Or rather, you lose the illusion of what you once were to them. It feels like grief, and it is, not because you did something wrong, but because you finally did something honest. You chose you, and for some, that was the first time they saw someone choose themselves without apology. And it scared them. It triggered their story, that love means sacrifice, that truth must bend, that healing should be quiet and unseen. But you didn't stay quiet. You didn't stay small. You spoke, you stopped explaining, you stopped asking permission to exist, and suddenly you were no longer safe for their projections. Jung said, that individuation, becoming your authentic self, is not optional. It's imperative. But it is not painless. It is not popular. It is not always welcomed. It costs comfort. It costs certainty. It costs the approval of those who only loved your edited self. But what you gain is everything. Integrity, peace, freedom, the freedom to live unmasked, to speak without fear, to love without losing yourself. And yes, there are days it aches, nights it stings, but you are not alone. You are walking a path few dare to take, the path back to yourself. If this cost feels too high, pause and whisper, I am not who I was, and I will not trade truth for belonging ever again, because the real ones, the ones who meet you here, they won't need you to shrink. They'll need you to rise, and you're rising. This journey was never about becoming someone new. It was always about returning to what you were before they told you who to be. The path isn't forward. It circles inward, through the masks, through the silence, through the ache of being misunderstood. It leads you back to the you beneath all that noise, the one who always knew, always felt, always waited. Carl Jung said, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And one by one, you've broken them. You faced the shadow. You held the silence. You stood in your truth, even when it shook the room. You've walked through loss, through mirrors, through fire, and what remains isn't bitterness, it's clarity, it's self-respect, it's presence. You don't need to be louder. You just need to be rooted. You don't need everyone to understand. You just need to understand yourself, and now you do. You've outgrown roles. You've outgrown the need to be liked. You've outgrown the life that asked you to disappear. You didn't become colder. You became clearer. You didn't become selfish. You became sovereign. And for the first time, you're walking beside yourself instead of away. That is healing. That is coming home. If you've felt any of this, let it echo back, whisper it here, or write it where no one else sees. I am learning to live unmasked, unbent, unafraid. Because this journey, though quiet, though lonely at times, has always been the only one that matters, the one that leads back to you.